Welcome back to IDP Plus Trends, offensive waiver wire show. It is week 13 around the NFL, and for your upcoming fantasy football matchups, welcome. It's almost time for the playoffs. Important week for waivers, even though a bleak week for waivers. Week for waivers. Not much out there, but as always, we're going to talk some quarterback streams, some running back, wide receiver, and tight end plays the best we can with limited information thus far. But going right into quarterbacks, right now there are three streamable quarterbacks. Hopefully, you do not need to stream a quarterback here in week 13 as there are no bye weeks. But if you do, I think your best bet is actually going to be Cooper Rush from the Dallas Cowboys. Only owned in 5% of Yahoo leagues. Cooper Rush has actually had 600 yards, 601 yards over the last 2 weeks with 3 touchdowns. So, averaging 300 yards and a touchdown and a half. Pretty solid. Plays the Giants, gets the Giants on Thanksgiving. The Giants have actually only intercepted one pass, strangely enough, this year. So Cooper Rush, somebody who we're probably worried about with the interceptions. We know he's going to have to throw the ball. This is going to be a pretty competitive game, I would think. In division game, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys really want to win this one. So Cooper Rush has been refining his skills. I think he can make it a third good game in a row here for your fantasy teams and Dallas Cowboys alike. I think, Cooper Rush has a decent floor and high upside. I mean, I would usually say his floor is a little bit lower, but in this matchup versus the Giants, they've only had one interception the whole year. It's in division matchup. Maybe it's a little bit grittier there, but again, I expect him to throw the ball. He looked good with Schoonmaker last week. CeeDee Lamb, hopefully he's gonna play, and you're gonna know because this game's on Thanksgiving. So if all these stars are aligned and in the active lineup for the Cowboys, I think Cooper Rush is actually a good, sneaky, high upside play on Thanksgiving once again. So he's my number one this week as far as quarterbacks, even though projections might tell you otherwise. Another guy who I think is my number two, if it's not Rush, I think it's going to be Russell Wilson, 36% owned on Yahoo right now. So he's out there. He's available for you. 270 yards, passing yards with 1 touchdown versus Cleveland in Week 12 in the snow. So that's a pretty good litmus test right there of, if there's bad weather, is Russell Wilson going to be able to get it done? Maybe some people are thinking Justin Fields got some more snaps. He's going to get more snaps this upcoming game. I think that's the opposite case in Pittsburgh. Here, people are pretty upset that Justin Fields was on the field when, why is your starting quarterback not on the field third down? Those kind of big pressure plays. So Russell Wilson, I think, is actually going to be more hungry. The Steelers are going to give him, more opportunities to throw this week. Versus the Bengals, another in-division matchup. Horrible defense the Bengals have. This is a bottom 5 defense around the league. So actually allowing the 4th most points to quarterbacks this year is the Cincinnati Bengals. This game could go 2 ways. It could be a shootout, as any game with the Bengals has the potential to. And maybe the Steelers have to kind of keep the pace with the Bengals, which is what you're hoping for if you have Wilson, because that means he has to throw more. The Bengals are scoring. The Steelers hopefully will score to match it. And, Pickens, it looks like Russell Wilson can throw the ball. He wanted to throw the ball down the field all day versus the Browns. And hopefully he can keep that up here. It's going to be needed, I think, in Week 13 versus the Bengals, who are vulnerable. So, also, how it could end is that the Steelers, because of the division game, Steelers recover a fumble, score, get an interception, score again. Now they're up 14-0. Now Russell Wilson becomes a bad play. So, again, this is an in-division matchup. Who knows how it's going to pan out, but I would bet on the side of Russell Wilson needing to throw and stay, competitive with Joe Burrow and company. So I think Russell Wilson makes for a fine, 250 yard plus, over 250 yards with a passing touchdown or more. So Russell Wilson, fine stream this week. And finally, the rookie Drake May, owned in 18% of Yahoo leagues versus Indianapolis. I mean, if this was a bottom 10 matchup, I'm not recommending starting Drake May, but it's a top 10 matchup, for opposing quarterbacks for May. So Over 200 yards for the second straight time. Last week was versus Miami. He had 222 passing yards, a touchdown, an interception, 5 rushes for 26 yards as well. And he's had 2 or more touchdowns, and that's passing, rushing, or receiving, you could say, in only 3 out of the 7 games this season. Once again, only 2 or more touchdowns in 3 out of the 7 games he started. I think Week 13 versus Indy should be a 2-touchdown game here, whether it be 2 passing, 2 rushing, or 1 of each. I do expect this to be a great matchup for Drake May and company. He got Kendrick Bourne back. Even though it's not a huge difference maker so far, it seems like he's got great rapport with Demario Douglas and also Keyshawn Booty, who has become the number 2 receiver. Like, things are looking up here. And Drake May, also, if you have premium on rushing yards, gets an additional boost there. So, hey, and anytime a quarterback can score on the ground, makes him that much more, safe for your fantasy teams, fantasy starting lineup. So Drake May might be a sneaky, if you have injury or if you're in a deeper league, a sneaky stream for you this week. Moving on to our running backs, and this is where things get a little bit dicey. We don't have great information right now. We don't know if Gus Edwards is going to be the starting running back for the Chargers. We don't know if J.K. Dobbins has a serious long-term injury. Now, unanimously, probably the biggest name is Gus Edwards at 27% to pick up. Gus Edwards, when J.K. Dobbins surprisingly didn't play the second half on Monday night, he had 9 carries for 11 yards and a score. So nothing too crazy for Gus Edwards. Didn't light the world on fire. If we'll say that Dobbins is injured, at least for this game, I would expect Gus Edwards to get about 12 to 14 carries and goal line work, which would make him a solid RB2, lower RB2 / flex. But actually, I'm actually going to recommend you to take Kimani Vidal. Listen, if you need a starter out of these two and Dobbins isn't going to play this week, then it's going to be Gus Edwards. You're hoping for the touchdown, hoping for the volume, 8 to 10 carries, 40, 50 yards. Got it. But let's say you don't need a running back this week. Maybe things are looking good. You don't have Austin Eckler. You don't have, J.K. Dobbins. You're rolling fine for the playoffs. Then I think Kimani Vidal is the player you need to stash. Like, this guy was getting drafted. He had a higher price tag, I should say, draft day than Gus Edwards did. Like, we really thought if J.K. Dobbins isn't it, the rookie's going to come back and be the 3 down back. And quite honestly, I think that's the difference here is that Kimani Vidal could be a 3 down back, whereas Gus Edwards, we've seen be a three down back last year for the Ravens. He ended up with his lowest efficiency out of all his years in Baltimore. So Gus Edwards, I think, is a fine 8 to 10 carry type of guy. Good chance to get in the end zone, and maybe a solid 8 to 10 points you can bank on if he's the starter. Kimani Vidal, if Gus Edwards is healthy, even if Dobbins is out, I don't think this week 13, you can start Vidal minus the deepest of leagues. This is somebody who I think has a way bigger upside, has the ability to be a 3 down back. It's just, are they going to give him this opportunity this year? And what is J.K. Dobbins' injury? Is it serious, or is he going to be back next week? So, actually, I'm going to say again, if Dobbins is out, if I have to start one week 13, my year's on the line, I'm going to start Edwards. But don't get me wrong, the position I'd rather be in is, not having to start either, and it being Vidal, because I think for your playoffs, he's going to have the higher upside. And get more carries as the season rolls along here for the Chargers. The next guy I wanted. Oh, and one more thing about both of these backs here in LA. They got a solid Week 13 matchup versus Atlanta. So if Dobbins is back, then great RB2 with RB1 upside. But if Dobbins is not back, I think Gus Edwards can be a solid RB2 or a flex play. And Vidal is a desperation in the deepest of leagues until we see further proof. Okay, so moving on, Jeremy McNichols is the only other guy I'd consider picking up and starting as a running back this week. It's really bleak, really weak for running backs, especially. And McNichols, I think, is actually a good bet here. First off, both running backs right now, Austin Eckler is dealing with a bad concussion. Who knows if he'll be able to play this week? Also, and then you've got Brian Robinson didn't take a snap in the second half of Week 12. Wasn't healthy enough apparently. I don't know if he's going to even play. Probably more likely you'll see Robinson out there than Eckler at this point. Eckler looked like a bad concussion. No guarantee that he'll be back for Week 13. But Jeremy McNichols, he did get 3 carries for 22 yards after Eckler left versus Dallas this past week in Week 12. Robinson, did not get a carry that second half. Week 4, what I'm specifically looking at here, why I'm looking at Week 4 is because that was when Austin Eckler was out. We saw Jeremy McNichols become a strong waiver wire ad in Week 5 because of his Week 4 game. He had 8 carries for 68 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 1 catch for 6 yards. Now, Jeremy McNichols, this is actually like the same kind of storm. This was a game that Brian Robinson did play, but Austin Eckler was out. It could be that's what happens in Week 13. Eckler's out, Robinson plays, and then that's kind of a similar role, 8 to 10 carries with some receiving work that you could see for McNichols. So, I mean, I think that's at worst for McNichols. I think he's definitely going to have a role this week. I don't see Eckler playing, and who knows if Robinson does either. And to put really more sugar on top of this situation, Jeremy McNichols, they get the Titans. The Commanders get the Titans in Week 13. Not really a scary matchup, but the thing that the caveat, the silver lining here is Jeremy McNichols actually some of the only meaningful snaps he's played in his career have been on the Titans. So this is a bona fide revenge game for Jeremy McNichols. Although he didn't make a huge name for himself in Tennessee, this is a revenge game. So adding a little bit of salt on the food there. And, Tennessee, I'd imagine Washington's going to be up in this game. They're going to use, heavy doses of Jeremy McNichols in order to keep Robinson or both Eckler healthy. So Jeremy McNichols, I think, is in a great spot this week. I think he has a higher upside, even if J.K. Dobbins is out and Gus Edwards is the starting running back this week. I'd rather play Jeremy McNichols. I think he's in a great spot. He's going to get a lot of usage, and Washington's going to be up and can afford to use him and soak up some snaps. So Jeremy McNichols, maybe not the long-term investment guy here. Also has a bye week 14. So if you don't need him for Week 13, you're probably not considering McNichols, or shouldn't at least. And others to consider, Tank Bigsby, 39% owned on Yahoo. Somebody to stash. I'm not rolling him out there and starting him Week 13 versus Houston. Bad matchup. I don't know his usage. Etienne's still there, even though I think Bigsby, we all know, should be the starter. It's just a mess in Jacksonville. So pick up Bigsby. If he can, have little spurts of potential that he showed earlier in the season, maybe he gets that role. But right now it's not guaranteed. Tajay Spears, maybe a potential desperation play or person to stash. Gets Washington this week, maybe a top 5 matchup for running backs. So if he can somehow play, also had a concussion, I think Tajay Spears, this might be a game where he does well. Amir Abdullah was a popular pickup, owned in 24% of leagues, was a popular pickup last week. If you were there, you got him, congrats. He had that game. He had a great game. He had 8 carries for 28 yards. Most surprising to nobody, did most of his damage in the pass game with 5 catches for 37 yards and a receiving touchdown. And this was against a Denver team that actually, as strong as their defense is, their ability to defend running backs catching the ball has actually been poor. They've been giving a lot of receptions to running backs. So I wasn't surprised to see the Amir Abdullah, big game. I was surprised not to see my boy Dylan Laube. I don't know when his opportunity is going to come now. I do expect either Zamir White or probably Alex Madison to return this week. which kind of throws a wrench in Amir Abdullah. I don't think Amir Abdullah, is going to repeat, even if none of the running backs come back, no White, no anybody. I don't think that Amir Abdullah gets the same points output box score this week because, again, how I mentioned, Denver was a great matchup, in Kansas City, maybe one of the top two of the top 2 or 3 defenses around the league. Denver gives up a lot of points to receiving running backs, or running backs receiving the ball, whereas Kansas City simply does not. So I don't think this is going to be a week to start Amir Abdullah. I just think if you had him last week, congrats. Take your loss or take your win and move on. But unless really Zamir White and Alex Madison are out again, I don't think you're going to really want to roll out Amir or have ambitions to roll out Amir Abdullah. Hopefully, no buys this week. You have better options. But, in the deepest of league, say there's no Zamir White, no Alex Madison. Amir Abdullah is absolutely the guy I'm going to roll out. So, of whoever's left. So Amir Abdullah, I think, was a one-hit, type of wonder. You either got it or you didn't. Some other guys to consider now that we got our playable guys out of the way. Looking at players to stash, maybe you might want to you're locked up for a long playoff run, and you have some players you can afford to drop. Maybe guys like Kimani, Vidal, Trey Benson, your Tyler Algiers. Now your backup. Your league winners can be rostered. Blake Corum, Roshan Johnson, Ray Davis, these type of players. But let's go ahead and make sure we have good solid options for Week 13, especially if it's in a position where you didn't make the playoffs, didn't shore up your playoff spot yet. So Gus Edwards and I think Jeremy McNichols, probably the 2 biggest names this week until we hear other news, at least potentially 2 of the biggest pieces of news. Moving over to our wide receivers. As bad as it was for the running backs, I don't think it's that bad for the wide receivers. Get a little bit better here. I'm going to start it off. My number 1 wide receiver to add this week, owned in 43% of Yahoo leagues, and that's Keon Coleman versus San Francisco. I think this is a good matchup to own Keon Coleman, to roster him and throw him out in your lineup. He's coming off back-to-back games with 7 targets in week 7 and week 8 before just playing barely into the first quarter of week 9 of being injured. So those 2 last games were trending up. Week 7, 4 catches for 125 yards, so he eclipsed 100 yards in week 7. Week 8 did not eclipse 100 yards, but did have 5 catches for 70 receiving and a touchdown. And he's kind of an ascending physical player in this great Buffalo offense. And he seems to have big upside, decent floor, and a good ability to get touchdowns. Even though week 9, only 1 catch for 21 yards, then he got hurt. I'm throwing that out the window. I'm looking at the last 2 before that, week 7 and week 8, where he broke 100, and then he had a touchdown. So I think, whatever way it happens, whether it be the touchdown, the big play, volume, like Keon Coleman is no guarantee for that, but he can get it in multiple ways. Like if he gets 1 touchdown, he serves your team well. If he gets 100 yards, obviously he serves your team well. If he gets volume, he's going to do good for your team. So even though they have a plethora of options there in Buffalo, maybe Keon Coleman is the 3rd or 4th, at worst, the 4th option. I still am starting Keon Coleman with all the confidence in the world. Like I said, an ascending physical player who has touchdown upside, high upside overall. And I think he's actually going to get more targets as the season wears on. So I think Keon Coleman is in a great spot. If someone dropped him and you were able to pick him up and start him, especially in deeper leagues, this is a great flex play. So go and get Keon Coleman. Also has 3 cake matchups after this good matchup with San Francisco. Week 14, he gets the Rams. 15, Detroit. And then week 16, New England, these are all top of the top third matchups of the league: the Rams, Detroit, and New England. And I do expect San Francisco to be a kind of a shootout this week. So Keon Coleman, I think, will be needed. The second guy who I think can help you in your lineups this week, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, owned in 25% of Yahoo leagues. He's going to play the Rams this week, and actually that's a great thing because the Rams allow the 7th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. His past floor of is he the number one receiver? Is he the number three receiver? He's the number one receiver. Before, I don't think I could say he has a safe floor, but being the number one receiver, even if he doesn't catch that 60-yard bomb for a touchdown, I still think he's going to end probably at worst 6-7 points. So go into the game knowing that this guy is either going to get me 6 or 26. And the reason I'm confident starting him is not because I'm confident in him getting that big touchdown. I mean, this is a guy who's only had 5 catches the past 2 games. 3 of them have been touchdowns. This guy needs a touchdown probably to do well, but at the same time, if you've watched earlier in the year, Derek Carr, Rashid Shaheed, that connection was going to be lethal for the duration of the year. Unfortunately, Shaheed got hurt. Maybe this is the poor man's Rashid Shaheed play. So Marquez Valdes-Scantling, it's given us inklings, reminding us of what great connection that was with Derek Carr and Rashid Shaheed, but Shaheed no longer there. Maybe this is hopes to Marquez Valdes-Scantling can do that once every game. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but a guy who can get you 28 or 6 points, I think you can do a lot worse than. So Marquez Valdes-Scantling is got a great matchup against the Rams. They should be down in this game, needing to compete. So I would call Marquez Valdes-Scantling a wide receiver 3 with huge upside, albeit a low floor. Finally, the last guy I want to talk about, I mentioned him last week. Don't really like to double dip, just kind of want to take my victory lap here, even though he's relevant again for week 13. And that's Devaugh Vele, number 2 receiver now. The proof is in the pudding for Denver with ascending Bo Nix, still only owned in 6% of Yahoo leagues. Gets Cleveland a very great matchup for wide receivers. This is a top 5 matchup for Devaugh Vele. He gets a bye week, week 14. He's going to catch his bye after this week, so maybe don't invest too much in him, or if you don't necessarily need him for this week, probably don't spend a waiver on him. But yeah, I think this is really what it is. This is number 2 receiver in Denver. This is he's coming off season highs in targets with 9 and 80 yards. Those are both season highs, career highs. Then he's a rookie, so his best game of the season. 6 catches for 80 yards, even though Courtland Sutton's there, with 2 touchdowns, kind of soaking up the touchdowns. Devaugh Vele, just on his volume, on his chemistry with Bo Nix itself, he's doing well for your teams, PPR, non-PPR. It doesn't really matter. He's probably putting up 8 to 10 points for your team every week, and I think this is going to be a great game. The Browns and the Denver Broncos. I think this is going to be a competitive game. Devaugh Vele is in a great spot, a great matchup, and I think the game flow is going to allow Bo Nix to not have to run the ball because they're up so much. I think this is a pretty even game. Excited to see how it goes. Potentially 2 great defensive matchups, but no Cedric Tillman. I don't know what that's going to do for Cleveland. But as far as Devaugh Vele, he's their number 2 receiver here on Denver's side of the ball, and I still think even Bo Nix, even though this is the number 2 receiver, the stats actually besides the touchdowns are not far at all behind Courtland Sutton. So if you're looking for stability in Denver's offense, there's probably only 2 players you can say, the other being 2 position players. One being Courtland Sutton, and the other one probably Devaugh Vele over any other running back, wide receiver, tight end, anything there. So Devaugh Vele, I think in deep leagues especially, is a great 8 to 10 point start. Not really high upside, but a very safe floor. So I love Devaugh Vele. I love Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Keon Coleman, especially in week 13. And if you can't get those guys, other guys to consider, maybe let waivers. Don't burn a waiver on these guys unless you really feel like your season's on the line. Probably clear free agents, and then you can pick them up tomorrow morning or Wednesday morning. And that is Nick Westbrook-Akine. Rashad Bateman's actually, I think only owned in 37% of Yahoo leagues. Probably needs to be owned more. Demario Douglas still down in owner percentage. Noah Brown, Elijah Moore, Kendrick Bourne. Calvin Austin, Adam Thielen, Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, David Moore. These are all players who you could get. I don't think you'd even have to spend a claim on. You could probably pick majority of those guys up when they become free agents. So bad week to stream in general, but decent week for the wide receivers. And then finally, we're going to move into our tight ends. I got 3 for you this week. Number 1 probably is owned in your league, is already up to 48% now, and that's Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz, another nice game with 6 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown in week 12. And then the last 2 weeks, if you look at it, the last 2 weeks combined, 12 catches for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. That'll play. So he's a decent streamer, decent in week 13 before the bye week in week 14. He gets Tennessee, and that's the reason I say decent streamer. This is a bottom 10 matchup. It's not a great matchup for Zach Ertz, which is probably why he's down in rankings right now. I believe he's out of the under the top 15, so I think he's 18 right now on Fantasy Pros. I probably have him a little bit higher. I think he gets volume. That's the thing. I mean, besides McLaurin, you're probably looking at a week with no Austin Eckler, maybe no Brian Robinson. I still think Zach Ertz is better, albeit a bad matchup, and I really don't expect. We saw Tennessee kind of surprise, look good against Houston this week. I don't expect Washington to just completely run away with this game. So I do expect Zach Ertz to be needed to catch the ball pretty often. So still think he's a viable streamer against Tennessee. Luke Schoonmaker from Dallas, now owned at 11%. I think this was the week to have him in week 12. He had 3 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown versus Washington. Week 11, the week before that, 2 weeks ago, he had 6 catches on 10 targets for 56 yards. So, I mean, you're looking at the past 2 weeks, 10 targets, over 50 yards, and then last week, even though 3 catches, it was 55 yards and a touchdown. So, as much as I like Cooper Rush this week, a lot of it is because an option like Luke Schoonmaker as his tight end. Not exactly Jake Ferguson, but I don't think Jake Ferguson being back in this game makes me like Cooper Rush more. I think Schoonmaker's the hotter hand. The fact that looks like right now Jake Ferguson is not practicing. It is Tuesday. He has not practiced yet. Does not look like, of course, Thanksgiving is on Thursday. Does not look like he's going to be back. So good. Get that headache for playing time out of here. Take your time as far as Ferguson goes. Give me Luke Schoonmaker this week. I think he's a solid 8 to 10 points. Not a huge upside. Maybe he has upside we haven't seen. I'd say at the most 15, 16 points, but a safe 8 to 10 points at the end of the day. So I think, just his volume is going to make him a solid play. Not saying he's going to have 10 targets or not saying he's getting in the end zone, but the fact that one of those things has happened in the last 2 weeks in a matchup where the Giants, this is a bad matchup, 2 tight ends, but come on now. I think just volume, like I said before, volume is going to make him a solid play. So not afraid of the bad matchup. If I'm streaming, Luke Schoonmaker is a great stream. And finally, Noah Gray. I mean, this guy's been on fire, owned in 4% of Yahoo leagues. He's got a top 3 matchup to tight ends versus Las Vegas this week. Last 2 games, 8 catches for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. So 4 catches in back-to-back weeks, 2 touchdowns combined in those 2. Like, this will play, and especially in a great matchup. No bye weeks this week. I don't know, what certain situation you'd want to start Noah Gray, but if you are very deep here, you're taking a long shot. I don't think you can say Noah Gray has a high ceiling, but I don't think you can say he has a high floor, but I absolutely do know that Noah Gray has a high ceiling. So maybe if your matchup isn't looking good this week, you really need to shoot for the stars. You need to make up a lot of points in the rankings. Maybe Noah Gray is the type of player you're going to take a shot on and roster for the 20 points. But again, they have great options. Juju Smith-Schuster didn't get much love. I don't know if that's going to continue. Noah Gray seems to be a great bet in the red zone. So anytime they're in the red zone, maybe Noah Gray gets an elevated chance to score. not only for in the NFL but for your fantasy teams too. But I think Noah Gray, if you're hunting touchdowns out there, is a decent play. This is not 1 week fluke. 4 catches back-to-back games, so you might as well, if you have nobody, ride it while it's hot. I think Noah Gray could maybe be a decent streamer for us coming up with lack of other options besides Hopkins, Travis Kelce, and a few other players there that scarcely get the ball. Maybe Noah Gray's upside becomes his normalcy for him. So we'll see where this goes. Overall, a horrible week for waiver wire ads. Probably not one where I'm spending any claims unless, again, I really need the points. This is a do or die matchup for me to win or go home, this week 13. So hopefully you do not have to use a claim, but these are guys that you can pick up once waivers clear. So as always, thanks for coming back to IDP Plus Trends. Good luck in your upcoming Week 13 matchups. Happy Thanksgiving from all of us here at IDP Plus. Good luck in your matchups, and we will see you for Week 14 Fantasy Football Waiver Wire on IDP Plus Trends.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.